Hello, this is Lawrence Romanowski from Porsche Centre Calgary, and we have a very interesting old British car here, one that I think could be unique in the world. Now, this is a 1981 MGB. Nothing unique about that. They made about 1 million MGBs from the probably 1963 to the last year, which would have been the last few months of 1980, I think. October 1980 was the last production month. This is from September 1980, so it's one of the very last MGBs. What makes this car special is that it's brand new, and it has 183 kilometers on it that are fully documented. And this is a car that was, as we say, pickled when new and put away since 1981. So here's a story of this MG. And I got this from the son of the dealer principal of the MG Triumph Jaguar dealer in Calgary that was Cook Motors, and it was on Centre Street in the 70s and 80s. And what he told me was that the MG, of course, was going out of production. They were going to close the Long Bridge assembly line, and the dealers still had a few cars left over in 1981 that would have been produced in 1980. They were titled as 81s, but made in 1980, and this. The dealer principal's name was Don, and as was the custom in those days, at around 2 o'clock they went for cocktails, and Don had his friends, and that's what you did in the car business back then. Sadly, those days are no longer. Anyway, one of the customers, his friends that used to join him on these mid-afternoon cocktail hours was an engineer named Morris. Okay, and he worked for the Castrol Oil Company and was a lubrication engineer. And Don, the dealer principal, said to him, you know, they're not making these cars anymore. I have 5 or 6 left on the showroom floor, and that's it. They're not making any anymore. Why don't you buy one? And so Morris said, okay, I'll buy one. I'm gonna pickle it. I'm going to put it away. It's the last MGB. The MG has a long history going well back before World War II. A lot of competition success in British hill climbs and so forth in the small displacement categories. As with just about anything British in the 70s, they lost their way, mostly because there was cars like the Datsun 240Z and so forth, which were just more modern and offered higher performance, etc. But anyway, so he thought, okay, well, it's the last MGB, the last one they're making. They've been in, they must have been in production for 75 years or something, at the MG Car Company. And so he then bought this car and pickled it. And he was a very fussy guy and an engineer, and one of these engineer car enthusiast guys that we see a lot of at Porsche. So he went to extraordinary lengths to preserve the car. So the fuel tank was drained, the exhaust was plugged, an oil mist solution was sprayed throughout the engine bay to keep the corrosion at bay. He took the valve cover off and sealed the combustion chambers by closing the valves on the car, so there'd be no condensation that would get in the combustion chamber, and misted the inside of the combustion chamber as well, dropped oil down the spark plug holes, and then put the plugs back in. The car was then meticulously prepared, put on jack stands. The jack stands were greased so that no rodents would get up to get at the car, and then there was a thick layer of blankets put on the car, and it was put away with 183 kilometers on the car. And it sat like that till about 10 years ago, when Morris passed away. It went on to a new collector. He took the car out, trailered it to Radium Hot Springs for a big car collector show there, dragged it out of the trailer, showed it, put it back on the trailer, and put the car away again. Okay, so this car is never driven since 1981 was the last time it was started. I can't describe to you the preserved state of it. You would expect everything to be dried out, the paint to be cracking, the vinyl in the rear window to be yellowing. You would expect dry cracking on the tires, surface rust throughout the engine bay, maybe parts of the interior starting to crack and so on. But for whatever reason, attribute to the way the car was preserved and the way the car that was stored and the dry climate, dry but moderate temperature climate in Calgary, it is absolutely as new. The soft top is still supple. The vinyl feels supple. Like I said, the rear window in the soft top is perfectly clear with no yellowing and with no discoloration or light scratching. The weather seals are still nice and supple all throughout the car. It feels the same as our brand new cars in the showroom. There is no evidence of dry cracking on the tires. The paint looks new. The car, it really does look like a brand new MGB. There's nothing you could point to in this car to suggest that it's anything other than a brand new car. Now, it does present the problem. What do you do with it? And that we're just going to leave to the next owner. We elected not to touch the car. We didn't even wash the car. There is still a plastic vinyl sticker, clear, affixed to the door from the factory, so that when people were putting in their key, they didn't scratch it. It's still there. We didn't want to wash the car and maybe wash it off. We didn't try to revive the car because we didn't want to disturb its originality. And now the next owner has to decide what to do. Do you put this car away as the ultimate guide to originality for a 1981 MGB and just not touch it? There's people that will say, well, what good is that? It's a sports car, you're supposed to drive it. But it's probably the only one like this in the entire world. There's a million other MGBs, well, not anymore, but maybe a third of them survive. But there's certainly lots more MGBs, so if you wanted to drive an MGB, you could just get a restored one and drive it. And what do you do with this one? Do you sympathetically recommission it for light use? Or do you keep it in a collection? Well, that's up to the next owner to decide. We didn't want to decide that for ourselves, and so we just left the car alone. Certainly, if you did want to recommission it for road use, there would be a few things you do. Certainly, you'd go through the braking system and change the seals in the wheel cylinders and master cylinders and so forth. And it would be good practice to flush out the fuel tank before you ran gas through the carburetors and so forth. And if you were traveling any distance, it would make sense to probably remove these wheels and tires and replace them with a modern equivalent. But other than that, you change the plugs, put a new battery in it, and then reset all the valves and so forth. I believe that's all you'd need to do to recommission this car for road use. But again, we elected to. It hasn't been touched since 1981, and we weren't going to be the people that did that. Now, the car also comes with a lovely binder, which, if you had any doubts about the fastidiousness of the owner, they would be erased by looking through this binder. Now, there are a few other videos where I've gone through this car in depth, mostly as to document the originality, coatings, fasteners, routing of wires, etc., for people who may want to restore their own MGB. There's another video on where I go through all of the documentation of it, but there are, so you can look at that, but there are pictures of the car that was new. There is a listing of the dates in which he changed the oil, the dates in which he polished the car. Well, that's rare. There's lots of fussy guys who mark the day they fill up with gas and their mileage and have records of the mechanical servicing of the car. I don't think I've ever seen a documentation on a car where the owner wrote down the day that he polished it. Okay, so he had the oil analyzed because he was a Castrol engineer. He had the oil analyzed. We have all of the original MGB registered cards and correspondence, and this article, Proper Procedure for Storing the Car, which is what he followed, which goes through everything you do to the cooling system, the oil, sealing off the combustion chambers, differentials, the electrical components, transmission, axles, etc. So it's a very long article about everything you do to put away a car, which this guy followed. Different envelopes, beer coasters from the MG Car Club, article from Road and Track, the original brochure on the car, wiring diagrams, and of course lots of Castrol stuff. So it's a fully documented car with a really lovely binder to go with it, and a really unique opportunity to drive, or to have, the world's one of the last MGBs. This car was a few thousand from the very last MGB produced, and like I said, it was produced in September of 1980. Production ended in October of 1980. The dealers still had some stock left over into 1981, and it's titled as a 1981. The owner did buy a few period accessories for the car, but kept all the original stuff. The light guards, this grill guard, there's an alloy, and you can see the photos of the other videos, an alloy valve cover that's installed. The original one is in the trunk. So we have all the original parts for the car. So an MGB isn't by itself the most collectible car, and a 1981 MGB isn't the most collectible of all the MGs, obviously. But this could very well be, I have no way of knowing for sure, but the lowest mileage, best preserved MGB on the planet. And so for that, it's a very unique piece, and obviously it's a pretty thin market for this particular car, but it's a very exciting find. And I guess lastly, the other thing that I could say is that every part for this MGB can be bought new now, including the body shell. But if you ever tried to do that, it would cost you $150,000 to build the car from new. So here's one at a fraction of the cost that is brand new. So with that, it'll be sad to see it go, because it's kind of a great conversation piece in the dealership. But we're going to do that and let the next custodian handle this car and do with it what they think best. But I hope you've enjoyed this car and talking about this car. It's Lawrence Romanowski from Porsche Center, Calgary. Thank you.